Jason Statham stood in the middle of a vacant training lot behind an old boxing gym, steam rising off his freshly worked muscles in the chill evening air. A single fluorescent bulb flickered overhead, casting the barest suggestion of his silhouette against the cracked asphalt. The moment crackled with tension, as if the very sky knew something seismic was about to happen. An onlooker would never guess that just 10 minutes earlier, Jason had been calmly wiping sweat from his brow after a routine practice session, until a certain Navy SEAL with too much bravado decided to crash his workout. The SEAL, who had introduced himself earlier as Commander Bradley Buster Knox, was not the typical stoic, disciplined type. He was the type who walked around with a puffed-out chest, a custom watch glinting at his wrist, and a showy grin that promised trouble. Most Navy SEALs carried themselves with quiet confidence, but Buster was an outlier. He was as brash and loud as they came. The moment he laid eyes on Jason Statham, he locked on with the kind of challenge-laden stare that signaled one thing. He wanted to prove he could take the movie star down. Standing a few yards away, Buster leaned forward with a smile that touched only one side of his lips. "I've seen you on the big screen taking out bad guys," he said, voice rough and condescending. "But that's choreographed nonsense. You ever go up against a real professional?" Jason had just blinked once and shrugged, not out of disrespect, but because he found no real point in fueling the man's pride. He'd been in real fights before. Movie sets were one thing, but he also had deep training in martial arts, diving, and a host of other physically demanding disciplines. He wasn't naive, however. A Navy SEAL was no joke. He knew what that title entailed: rigorous training, a mastery of combat tactics, and the kind of mental fortitude that few humans on the planet possessed. But Buster was out to make a show of it. Something about that rubbed Jason the wrong way. The gym's owner, an old friend of Jason's named Lennox, didn't like the look in Buster's eyes. "Jay," he muttered, stepping forward and trying to keep the tension under control, "you don't have to do this. Plenty of posers out there just trying to make a name for themselves." Lennox's voice trembled with worry, as if a street fight was about to break out. Yet something in Jason's gut told him to stand his ground. He sensed that Buster's challenge wasn't just for show. There was personal animosity there, perhaps a desire to prove that Hollywood star power meant nothing against a real soldier's training. Pride was about to clash with experience, and Jason Statham did not want to slither away from a legitimate challenge. Still wearing a mild, almost polite expression, Jason replied calmly, "With respect, mate, I know what you're capable of. But you're stepping onto my turf tonight uninvited." Buster's expression hardened. His lips curled back as if he couldn't believe this actor was daring to speak to him like that. "On your turf, or off it, you won't last 10 seconds once we get down to business." Jason crossed his arms over his chest, the tendons in his forearms visibly taut beneath the faint light. "Well then, we'll just have to see, won't we?" Word spread quickly through the gym that something big was about to go down. The back lot began to fill with curious onlookers, trainers, amateur fighters, a few loyal fans who sometimes loitered around hoping to catch a glimpse of Jason in his downtime. In the corner, perched on a stack of weathered wooden crates, two teenage fighters in threadbare tank tops stared wide-eyed, whispering speculations about who would come out on top. No one doubted the Navy SEAL's lethal skill set, but then again, Jason Statham's no slouch. For a moment, quiet reigned. If you close your eyes, you could hear the faint hum of the gym's battered old air conditioner pushing out stale air, or the intermittent chirping of crickets beyond the chain-link fence. It was the kind of stillness that precedes a downpour, a hush before the skies unleash a storm. Lennox paced back and forth between the two men, trying to think of something, anything, that might defuse the tension. He cleared his throat. "Let's keep this civilized," he suggested, only half believing it could stay that way. "Maybe gloves, a time limit." Buster's eyes never left Jason. "No gloves," he spat. "No timer. Just a simple takedown." Jason mirrored the SEAL's gaze with a confidence that came from years of real training, not just cinematic illusions. "If it keeps you happy, mate," he said, flexing his neck from side to side. For a split second, the watchful crowd, maybe a dozen people or so, saw something indescribable in Jason's posture. It wasn't hubris, nor was it fear. It was more like a calm acceptance that he would test himself, that something primal and honest would happen here. He trained in Krav Maga, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and Muay Thai, among other disciplines. Though he never served in the military, Jason's intense daily regimens had toughened him. He respected real soldiers, admired them, even. But this particular soldier was acting like a bully. Buster took a step closer, rolling his shoulders as though preparing for a wrestling takedown. "Come on, hot shot," he said, voice dripping with sneering confidence. "Let's see what you're really made of." And in that moment, everything seemed to slow down. The flicker of the overhead light, the shuffle of gravel beneath their feet, the crowd collectively holding its breath. Lennox glanced from one man to the other, parted his lips to say something, but then realized there was nothing left to say. The tension crystallized, thick as glass, ready to shatter at the slightest spark. Jason Statham stood there, fists unraised, waiting for the first move. Buster locked his jaw and inhaled slowly, a lion preparing to lunge. Everyone knew the instant of calm would soon erupt into something that might end in bruises or broken bones, or worse. And when the explosion came, it would be a sight no one would ever forget. Buster lunged first, exactly as Jason expected. The man's charge was quick, maybe too quick, relying on aggression more than strategy. Muscles coiled and tensed as he attempted to drive Jason back with a frontal assault. Jason sidestepped, pivoting neatly on the ball of his right foot, letting the SEAL's momentum carry him off balance. It was a classic redirection move Jason had perfected over years of training. But Buster was no amateur. As soon as he felt his weight shift awkwardly, he executed a swift pivot of his own, rotating into a side kick aimed at Jason's thigh. The move forced Jason to leap back, the edge of the boot barely missing flesh. A small gust of air brushed Jason's leg, hinting at how close the impact had been. The crowd sucked in a collective gasp, impressed that Buster had responded so quickly to the shift in control. "That's the difference between an actor and a real operator," Buster barked, though he sounded more cocky than genuinely instructive. "We adapt under pressure." Jason's lips twitched, the faintest sign of amusement. He paced a semicircle around the SEAL, testing the man's footwork. While Buster radiated pure power and confidence, Jason had a knack for reading subtle body cues, breathing rhythm, stance shifts, tiny tells in the eyes. He recognized that Buster was well-trained, but also seemed to rely heavily on intimidation. The crowd inched closer in a half-circle, forming a makeshift arena of sweaty T-shirts, dangling gold chains, and battered training shoes. Someone held up a phone, filming the face-off. Lennox hovered at the edge, arms folded, silently praying it wouldn't devolve into a hospital visit. "You want intimidation?" Jason said, his British accent calm as morning sea air. "You might have chosen the wrong target, mate. I'm not easily rattled." He feinted a left jab to test Buster's reflexes. The SEAL blocked with a forearm, lightning fast. Then, before Buster could follow up, Jason ducked low, hooking a punch into the SEAL's side. It wasn't a knockout blow, but it connected solidly, startling Buster and knocking a bit of wind out of him. An angry glimmer sparked in Buster's eyes. Taking advantage of that fleeting moment of disorientation, Jason swept a leg around, aiming for a takedown, but Buster jumped over it with surprising agility. Landing gracefully on the other side, the SEAL managed to slam a hard elbow toward Jason's shoulder. Jason leaned back just in time, but the blow grazed him, sending a sharp tingle down his arm. The onlookers cheered, some chanting Buster's name, others calling out for Jason. No one was exactly sure who held the advantage. It was like two apex predators testing each other's vulnerabilities, neither showing all his cards yet. The pure athleticism on display was mesmerizing. Calculated strikes, defensive moves, fluid transitions. "I don't care how many martial arts movies you've starred in," Buster sneered. "You're just another soft Hollywood star. You can't simulate life and death experiences in a stunt cage." Jason gave a faint nod, acknowledging the difference in their backgrounds. "You're right. But training is training, discipline is discipline. At a certain point, skill speaks for itself, doesn't it? Without warning, the Seal launched into a combination, a jab, a cross, and a low kick that forced Jason to defend with short, choppy blocks. A glimmer of sweat flew off Jason's temple with each impact, but he kept his composure, absorbing the hits on his forearms and ankles. A final hooking punch nearly caught Jason's jaw, but he deflected it at the last second, stepping inside Buster's reach. He brought a knee up toward the Seal's midsection. Buster twisted his torso and blocked with both arms crossed. Their eyes locked in that brief deadlock, arms and legs entangled in a freeze frame of perfectly matched force. "You're better than I expected," Buster muttered through clenched teeth. "Same to you," Jason replied. Then almost simultaneously, they disengaged, both stepping back a few paces. It seemed both men wanted to regroup, to reevaluate. Jason's chest rose and fell in measured inhales. Buster's breath came in more ragged spurts, but the Seal's expression remained fiercely determined. The circle of spectators drew even tighter, tension crackling like an electrical storm. Blood pounded in Lennox's ears as he watched, wanting to intervene, but he knew the situation had progressed too far for anyone's random interference. This was a personal contest. Jason wiped a trickle of sweat from his brow. "You've got skill, mate, I'll give you that. But you're telegraphing your moves. You come in like you're expecting me to crumble." Buster responded by spitting on the ground near Jason's feet. "You still think you have a chance against someone with real combat experience? This is child's play compared to what I've seen." "Maybe so," Jason allowed. "But let's not forget, I've spent my entire life conditioning my body and my instincts. Different battles, same principles." The tension escalated to a near breaking point. Buster circled Jason like a predator sizing up his prey, but Jason recognized the slight tremor in the Seal's stance, a sign that the man's bravado might be cracking. In a corner of his vision, Jason noticed two teenage boxers, their faces alight with awe. They were about to witness something far beyond their normal training routine. Suddenly, Buster lunged again, this time aiming for a grappling maneuver. He closed the distance quickly, hooking an arm around Jason's neck. The abruptness caught Jason off guard, forcing him to twist awkwardly to avoid being choked out. The hold was strong, military grade. Jason's airway tightened, and 1,000 microscopic stars danced in his peripheral vision. On instinct, Jason slammed an elbow into Buster's rib cage, once, twice, until he felt a grunt of pain reverberate through the Seal's body. Buster loosened his grip fractionally, just enough for Jason to duck free and spin around to face him. The exchange left them both panting, adrenaline coursing through each man's veins. For a moment, neither attacked. Instead, they stared each other down, like dueling swordsmen who had tested each other's mettle and were now deciding how much more they had to give. No one spoke, but the crowd could practically taste the electricity in the air. Jason knew that Buster was dangerous, but he also sensed a kind of desperation in the Seal's eyes. Whether it was the pressure of losing face in front of an audience or the echo of personal demons, Buster was fighting with a streak of recklessness now. That could be exploited, but Jason had to be cautious. One well-placed blow could still end him. And so the stage was set for the next round, a crescendo of fists and will, with reputations on the line. What neither man knew was that this was about to escalate beyond a simple backlit duel. There were secrets and grudges simmering under Buster's bravado, and Jason's instincts told him that it was more than just a clashing of egos. It was about to become something that shook them both to the core. Lennox couldn't bear the tension a second longer. He pushed through the gathered throng and stepped between the combatants, arms raised like a referee. "Enough. If you two want to keep this up, do it in the ring. Not in my parking lot where cops will show up any minute." Jason took a measured breath, nodded. Even Buster, who looked like a panther caught mid-pounce, swallowed his fury long enough to concede. Truthfully, neither fighter wanted a legal fiasco. With an unspoken agreement, they followed Lennox into the gym. A wave of spectators streamed behind them, stifling the usual stale smell of old leather and disinfectant with their own excited presence. Inside, the ring lights cast a stark yellow glow on every battered punching bag and scuffed bench. A large, faded mural of a champion boxer from decades ago stared down from the wall, as if witnessing some new epic of glory. The ring itself was an old wooden structure with a thick canvas top and ropes that sagged slightly from years of body weight. Lennox motioned for them to step into the ring. If you want to keep going, at least do it right. Boxing gloves, MMA gloves, no gloves, whatever, but let's have a set of rules. Buster shook his head. The only rule I'll accept is submission or knockout. He glared at Jason. I'm not dancing around with you for points. Jason exhaled sharply, then lifted his gaze to Lennox. I'm okay with that. Submission or knockout, then. Whispers filled the gym's cramped interior. A few more folks had trickled in from the street upon hearing the commotion, drawn by the promise of a high-octane showdown. The ring quickly became the focal point, with a makeshift audience crowding around on all sides. With a nod, Lennox gestured for both men to step to opposite corners. Look, I can't stand here and watch you two kill each other. But if I see either of you crossing a line, I'll stop it. He paused, letting his gaze settle on Buster, who scoffed in annoyance. Jason hopped in place a couple times, rolling his shoulders, feeling that peculiar calm that arrives when everything else disappears. No cameras, no Hollywood directors calling cut. Just the raw tension of a real fight. He sized up Buster's stance, slightly squared, indicative of a willingness to grapple, but also one that made the Seal vulnerable to leg sweeps. In the glint of Buster's eyes, Jason read a fierce commitment. This man wasn't going to back off easily. Ready? Lennox asked, voice loud enough for the entire gym to hear. Jason nodded. Buster gave a curt jerk of his chin. With that, Lennox waved his hand in the universal sign that said go. Buster bounded forward, throwing a vicious right cross. Jason ducked under it, pivoted to the side, and landed a quick jab on Buster's flank. The crowd roared. Buster responded with a snapping front kick that Jason parried with a sweeping motion of his forearm, though the force still jarred him. Punches and counterpunches flew in a staccato rhythm, each fighter reading the other with hawk-like focus. The ring's wooden floor echoed their footwork like an ancient drum. Buster tried another grapple, seeking to overpower Jason's limbs. Jason circled out, hooking an arm under Buster's to break free, spinning away to avoid a takedown. You're slippery, Buster growled, a trickle of sweat running down his temple. Part of the job description, mate, Jason quipped. They exchanged blows that would have caused an ordinary man to collapse. Buster's fist slammed against Jason's shoulders and torso in a flurry, forcing Jason to tighten his defense. As tough as he was, Jason felt his muscles start to ache. The Seal's strikes were heavy, each one launched with calculated aggression. In return, Jason managed a few snap kicks to Buster's ribs and a crisp elbow to the side of his face when the Seal left an opening. The crack of bone against bone drew a unified ooh from the crowd. A vein pulsed at Buster's temple, and his lips twisted in anger. He ignored the blow's impact, hooking his arms around Jason's waist and driving him into the corner. The ropes creaked from the weight of both men as they grappled. Buster tried to secure a double-leg takedown, but Jason sprawled, shifting his hips to make it difficult. For a few seconds, they both wrestled for dominance, sweat pouring, every muscle taut. Jason realized that if he didn't quickly break Buster's hold, he'd be slammed to the canvas. So he delivered a barrage of short, sharp knees to the Seal's thigh. The repeated impact made Buster grunt, then weaken his grip just enough for Jason to slip free. The crowd was all cheers, exclamations, and pounding fists on the ring apron. This was pure adrenaline, unscripted and unstoppable. Every moment felt like the next could be the final, decisive blow. Jason glanced at Lennox for a heartbeat, relieved that his friend hadn't stepped in yet. This was an important test, one that felt oddly personal. Suddenly, Buster did something unexpected. He feigned a jab, then dropped to one knee and grabbed hold of Jason's ankle in a textbook single-leg takedown. The abrupt change in levels caught Jason off guard. He stumbled backward, trying to maintain balance. Buster pressed forward, capitalizing on Jason's brief vulnerability, and forced him down onto the canvas. A hush fell over the gym, quickly replaced by frenzied shouting as Buster pinned Jason with a grappler's technique, controlling his torso and arms. Jason grit his teeth, his breath coming in short bursts. He felt Buster's forearm press against his throat, inching dangerously into a choke position. Jason summoned every ounce of his training, clamping both hands around Buster's arm and twisting his torso sideways. The angle was awkward, but he managed to snake one leg under Buster's body and push off. Gasping for air, Jason clambered out from beneath the seal, forcing them both to stand again. Buster's lips peeled back in a feral grin. He was like a man possessed, unstoppable, driven by something more than just winning a fight. Jason recognized that drive. Maybe it was pride, maybe it was some internal demon. Either way, it made Buster dangerous, unpredictable. Wiping blood from a split lip, Buster advanced again. His knuckles, already reddened, flexed with grim determination. Jason knew that the next few seconds were critical. They were both winded, battered, and losing the element of surprise. The next exchange might decide who walked out victorious. In that moment, time seemed to slow. Jason recalled the endless hours on training floors across the globe, from dingy Thai boxing gyms to refined dojos in L.A. All of it funneled into this singular confrontation. He refused to back down. He wasn't just an actor. He was a fighter, plain and simple. And with that resolve burning in his eyes, Jason stepped forward, heart hammering, ready to face the seal with every bit of skill he possessed. With everything else tuned out, the crowd, the bright lights, even Lennox's anxious gaze, Jason and Buster locked eyes for what promised to be the decisive clash. They lunged at each other almost simultaneously, Jason leading with a low kick aimed at Buster's calf to disrupt his balance, Buster countering with a swift punch at Jason's head. The collision of limbs echoed through the gym like a small thunderclap. Jason's kick landed, sending Buster's leg momentarily off kilter, but Buster's fist grazed Jason's temple, causing his vision to flicker with bright spots. For a split second, neither man noticed the door of the gym fly open. A tall, broad-shouldered figure in an official-looking uniform stepped inside, flanked by two more men. The moment might have passed unnoticed if not for one of them shouting in a booming voice, "Commander Knox, stand down." Buster froze. The color drained from his face. Jason staggered back, chest heaving, eyes locked on the newcomer. The gym fell silent as a hush spread among the spectators. Lennox turned to the uniformed men, confusion etched on his face. Slowly, Buster's posture went rigid, as though reverting to some ingrained military protocol. He lowered his fists, stepping back from Jason with clenched teeth. Jason, equally startled, glanced from Buster to the men at the entrance. Their stony expressions suggested they hadn't come to watch a friendly exhibition. The broad-shouldered man strode forward, ignoring the crowd as it parted to let him pass. His voice boomed again. "Commander Knox, you are ordered to remain on base pending further instructions." What is the meaning of this? Buster wiped sweat from his brow, but his hand trembled slightly. "Colonel Maxwell," he said, forcing a calmness that his eyes didn't reflect. This is just a private matter." Colonel Maxwell's jaw clenched. He glanced around the gym, at the shocked faces, the battered ring, Jason standing there with fists still half raised. A private matter that ends in an unsanctioned fight, apparently. Jason took a deep breath, unsure whether to speak up. He sensed that Buster was about to be in trouble. The tension in Buster's eyes had shifted from confidence to dread. He started it. A voice in the crowd piped up, pointing at Buster. Lennox scowled at the unknown heckler, trying to keep the situation calm. Colonel Maxwell's gaze swept over Jason, who nodded in greeting, though he suspected no one was in the mood for pleasantries. Then the colonel turned back to Buster. "We need to speak outside." Before Buster could protest, the colonel led him away, flanked by the two men. The crowd parted once more, uncertain whether to follow or remain. Jason shot a questioning look at Lennox, who simply shrugged, clueless as to what was unfolding. Curiosity got the better of the onlookers, and many pressed forward, though the colonel's glare warned them to keep their distance. Outside, the night air had grown even colder. The colonel folded his arms behind his back, his expression grim. "I've been informed about your conduct, Commander Knox. Desertion of duty, unauthorized absence. Do you know what that looks like on your record?" Buster lowered his head, but a sizzle of frustration lingered in his gaze. "I'm no deserter, sir. I just needed some time. My last deployment, things got complicated. I had to blow off steam." Jason hovered just inside the gym entrance, overhearing bits of the conversation. A wave of confusion washed over him. Why would Buster defy orders just to pick a fight with Jason Statham? It seemed personal, but they'd never met before tonight. Colonel Maxwell glanced over his shoulder and fixed Jason with a steady gaze. "Sir, I apologize for this incident. Commander Knox is dealing with some issues, but he shouldn't be interfering with civilians." Jason stepped forward, shaking his head. "No apology necessary, Colonel, but maybe let the man speak for himself. We all have issues we're dealing with. Not every outburst is pure aggression." Buster threw Jason a strange look, part anger, part relief. Then he pressed his lips into a line, choosing his words carefully. "I'm not proud of this, but I was told you," he pointed at Jason, voice wavering. "You were all tough talk and camera tricks. I wanted to prove something to myself. Something about facing my own illusions." A tense silence followed. Colonel Maxwell exchanged a glance with the two soldiers, as if trying to decide how to proceed. Then, in a more subdued tone, he told Buster, "We'll discuss your situation back at the base. You're on thin ice, Knox, but I'm not blind to the stress you've been under." With a resigned sigh, Buster nodded. He turned back to Jason, shoulders slumping. "Guess we didn't finish." Jason took in a lungful of the cool night air, searching the SEAL's face for a clue about this sudden softness. "Looks like you've got bigger problems than me, mate. The ring will always be there. Sort out your duties first." It was a strange ending to a fight that had promised to go on until one of them was out cold. The spectators filtered back into the gym, disappointed that the confrontation had ended prematurely, but buzzing about the drama that had just unfolded. Lennox eyed Jason with evident relief, though he looked sorry that the spectacle was over. Jason could only stand there, arms still shaking from the adrenaline, as Buster was led away under Colonel Maxwell's stern watch. In the days that followed, news of the fight spread like wildfire. Every local boxer, trainer, and gym rat in the vicinity told and retold the story. How a Smug Navy SEAL had barged in to challenge Jason Statham, only to be hauled off by his commanding officer before a decisive end. Some of the braver ones half-joked that maybe Jason had beaten some humility into Buster. Others speculated that the SEL had let Jason off easy. As for Jason, he returned to his training with a renewed sense of purpose. Something about that night had shaken him out of complacency, reminding him that even though he was an actor, his pursuit of martial arts was about more than showmanship. It was about discipline, self-awareness, and respect. He spent hours each day refining his grappling, transitioning between stand-up and ground techniques seamlessly. The memory of Buster's furious eyes, driven by a storm of unresolved tension, refused to leave his mind. Weeks later, Jason found himself standing in the same back lot behind Lennox's gym, the sun dipping below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery oranges. He just finished a rigorous training session when the roar of a motorcycle cut through the air. Helmeted and wearing a leather jacket, a man climbed off and killed the engine. Jason's heart gave a little jolt of recognition. It was Buster. The tension that once existed between them had shifted. Buster took off his helmet, eyes searching Jason's face for any sign of hostility. Then, without ceremony, he stuck out his hand. Jason gripped it, feeling the same iron strength he'd battled in the ring. "Got my situation squared away," Buster said quietly. "Medical leave for PTSD, but they're letting me stay in the SEALs if I undergo therapy. Thought I owed you an explanation." Jason studied him. "We all fight demons, mate. No shame in that." Buster exhaled, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "I see that now, and I'm sorry about how I acted. I was out of line." Jason nodded, letting the moment breathe. "Wouldn't mind a rematch someday, under better circumstances," he said, a small grin tugging at the corner of his mouth. To his surprise, Buster chuckled. Someday. Well, my head's right. But I will say one thing. He hesitated, looking Jason square in the eye. You've got nothing to prove. You're the real deal. I only wish I'd learned that without making a spectacle. Jason clapped a hand on Buster's shoulder, empathy gleaming in his gaze. Better late than never, right? They stood there a moment longer, sharing an unspoken understanding. Sometimes the biggest fights happen inside a person's mind, and they manifest outwardly in ways that catch everyone off guard. Yet it was in this unsteady territory that respect could be forged, even between two men who started off as bitter opponents. Buster eventually pulled away to mount his motorcycle again, but not before giving Jason one last solemn nod. The engine roared to life, and he peeled out of the parking lot, leaving a trail of dust and the echo of newfound respect. Jason remained there, watching the disappearing taillight, the adrenaline from their past confrontation long gone, replaced by a sense of closure, and maybe even the beginnings of friendship. The quiet night air washed over him, and he realized with a wry smile that this entire series of events was something no script could capture in its rawness and complexity. He headed back inside the gym, where Lennox stood with an eyebrow cocked, a silent question on his face. Jason just shrugged and said, "Life, mate, unpredictable as ever." Then he grabbed his towel and walked off to the showers, leaving Lennox to grin after him, well aware that stories like this would eventually become legend. And somewhere, miles away, a Navy SEL wrestled his own demons, no longer so sure that a movie star's training was all smoke and mirrors. The takedown had happened, perhaps not only in the ring, but in the pride and illusions both men once held. The world might never have been so speechless as they were that night, watching two determined fighters stand toe-to-toe, each discovering that victory isn't always about who lands the hardest punch. Sometimes it's about finding humility and mutual respect in the most unexpected of places.